Hello and welcome back to another video of Unearthing the Past. Today we will explore how archaeologists establish their chronologies. We will look first at how they date, place events and objects in sequence using relative dating methods, and we'll explain then which methods they use to establish calendar dates or absolute chronologies. Relative dating helps us determine which things are older or younger in relation to each other. It's one of the most fundamental skills in archaeology and often the first step in understanding a site. Relative dating is about placing finds, features, and events in chronological order without necessarily knowing their exact age. It's like arranging chapters in a book when the pages have no numbers, or as I like to explain to my students, it's like looking at a lasagna and identifying all the layers that were used to make it, from the most recent one on the top to the oldest one at the bottom. We might not know the date of each layer, but we can still say what came first, what followed, and what came last. Stratigraphy is the core of relative dating. Based on the law of superimposition, it tells us that lower layers are generally older than those above them. Think about the example I made earlier about the lasagna. You put the layers first, and these are the oldest ones, and then you cover them with a layer of bolognese sauce and so on until you get to the top, the newest layer. So when we excavate, rather than eating the lasagna as we normally do by cutting through the layers, we actually move through layers in reverse, peeling back the site's history. So we excavate one layer at a time. By analyzing how layers and features cut into or overlay each other, we build a relative sequence. So you see here, for example, in these images, we're cutting and excavating the top layer, and then it follows with the lower ones. Then we excavate layers 4 and then 5 and then 6 and so on. I will discuss more in detail about the techniques and how we identify the layers in the next lesson. To help organize complex stratigraphy, archaeologists use the Harris matrix. It's a diagram that maps out the relationships between contexts, what cuts what fills what, and what came next. The Harris matrix lets us reconstruct the sequence of events, even in multi-phase or heavily disturbed sites. So it's a way to arrange what apparently is a chaotic bunch of information into an orderly way, in a way that can be then explained and published for colleagues to check and for colleagues to get a better understanding of how the stratigraphic sequence has been identified. Relative dating can also be applied to artifacts because obviously within each context, within each layer, we might find, if we're lucky, some artifacts. And because artifacts change over time, studying them helps us understanding which types came before and which types came after. This in turn helps us establish the chronology of a layer when artifacts are found within it. So in order to use artifacts, we look at a couple of things. One is typology. So archaeologists historically have developed typologies of artifacts, which is the study of styles and how they change over time. So you see in this image, for example, a series of drinking vessels. One is Greek, one is Roman, a medieval one, and a modern one. All four of them were actually and have been actually used for drinking. So the function is the same. They contain liquids, but obviously their shape is different. For example, the Greek one is a large and shallow. The Roman, medieval, and modern ones are narrower and deeper. The materials are also different. So the Greek one, for example, is made of ceramic and clay, whereas the example of the Roman period, of the medieval and the modern periods are made out of glass. So materials can change, shapes can change, decorations can change. And when we are able, and archaeologists have done this for centuries, to develop sequences that show the transformation in the type and the style of pottery, this can help us understanding which one is earlier than another one. Seriation is another method of relative dating that we use. It works by arranging artifacts according to changes in their popularity over time. So once we have a sequence, for example, that established by typological analysis, the typological analysis of pottery and of artifacts, we then assess how fashionable they have been, how popular they have been in a given time. Much like fashion trends, indeed, some styles emerge, peak, and then fade in specific periods of time. By comparing artifact types from different layers, we can order them chronologically, even without absolute dates. Absolute dating, sometimes called also chronometric dating, refers to techniques that provide a calendar date or range for an object or for a context. Unlike relative dating, which orders events by doesn't give us exact dates, absolute dating methods let us say, for example, that a burial occurred between 500 and 530 CE, or a building was abandoned around 1200 BCE. Radiocarbon dating is the most common absolute technique. It measures the decay of carbon-14 in once living organic materials like wood, seeds, bones, or charcoal. Because C14 decays at a known rate, we can estimate how long ago the organism died. It works best for samples up to around 50,000 years old. Radiocarbon results are not read directly as calendar dates. They produce actually a statistical range in radiocarbon years, which must then be calibrated against known fluctuations in atmospheric C14 levels over time. The result is a date range, often expressed within a confidence intervals, like for example 95% probability the event occurred between 760 and 680 BCE, for example. Dendrochronology, or tree-ring dating, compares the pattern of growth rings in wood to establish master chronologies. Because trees produce one ring per year, we can often date timber used in buildings to the exact year it was felled. This doesn't mean that, for example, the building where the tree was employed was actually built that specific year, but from that specific year, definitely, because maybe would be left to season for a while. So, but it's the dating is quite precise. Dendrochronology is also very useful for certain areas of Europe, for example, where we have a lot of evidence for and data sampled, less maybe useful for other areas of the planet. It also helps refine radiocarbon calibration curves and environmental reconstructions. Thermoluminescence and optically stimulated luminescence are used to date materials that were last heated or exposed to light, like ceramics, hearts, or buried sediments. They measure the accumulation of trapped electrons over time. So when the object was last fired or was last buried, the clock resets, and these methods are useful for contexts without organic materials. Potassium-argon or argon-argon dating are used mainly in paleoanthropology and geology. They date volcanic materials by measuring the decay of potassium-40 to argon. This is especially useful in early human contexts, so millions of years old really, where organic remains are absent, but volcanic layers can bracket archaeological deposits as well. Other methods include obsidian hydration. You see here objects, prehistoric arrowheads made out of obsidian, measuring how water absorbs into the surface of obsidian after it's been worked. And also other methods that can be used are archaeomagnetic dating, which analyzes how fired material record the Earth's magnetic field. These are useful in specific conditions and often serve as supplementary tools to broader methods like radiocarbon or luminescence. The choice of dating technique depends on the materials available, the age range of interest, and the site's environmental conditions. Organic samples, radiocarbon. Fire ceramics, thermoluminescence. Tree rings, dendrochronology. No single method fits all situations, and archaeologists often combine approaches for greater accuracy and reliability. Absolute dating methods, however, are powerful tools that let us connect archaeology to historical chronologies and broader environmental changes. So, are really, really a field of research in archaeology that is incredibly powerful. When used carefully and interpreted critically, they transform artifacts and features into dated events. They allow us not just to say what happened, but when it happened and how different places and people fit together in time. Now let's go back to artifacts, because sometimes we need to combine the two elements, the relative dating and absolute dating. And this in particular takes place when we think about cross-dating and the process of cross-dating. So cross-dating allows us to link the chronology of different sites. If the same type of pottery or tool is found at two locations and we can date it at one site using, for example, stratigraphy or absolute dating, as in this case with dendrochronology, we can infer a similar date range at the other one. This method was especially important before techniques like radiocarbon dating existed. So you see here, you find perhaps a Greek cup in Asia Minor, in Turkey, dating to the 5th century BCE, because it's in a context that has been dated through dendrochronology, and you find a similar one that through typological studies and serration studies has been is identified as belonging at the same typology as the one you have found in Asia Minor. And this one found in Sicily is not associated in a context with any exact it's not possible to calculate the exact date of that context using dating technologies and the methodologies. So by simply cross-referencing and cross-dating these two elements, it is possible to date the evidence in Sicily and the context in Sicily thanks to the cross-referencing system. Objects found together in the same context are considered to be in association, as if the context, of course, is closed. If we can date one item, we can often date the others that were found with it. So let's make an example. You have a burial, and within this burial you have grey goods that may help date the interment of the burial itself. Within this burial you have maybe one object that you know the chronology of very, very well, and the other one that you don't know about. Because the context is sealed, it's within a burial, by close association, by the association of the two materials, you can date the object that is not the chronology of which is not very well known, because of the association with another object, the chronology of which is very well known. However, we must be careful because there can be, for example, disturbance or later intrusions that can complicate associations, or sometimes you can have a heirloom, an object that is much older than the date when the burial was excavated, when the person was buried, and that was kept in the family for maybe generations, and is then buried at a later stage. So obviously, it's generally dating is more complex than the examples I'm making, so you have to be aware of the differences, and experiencing that makes you being able really to provide chronologies that are carefully researched and critically assessed. But you get a sense of how we proceed as archaeologists when we are dealing with material culture and dating. So in general, relative dating gives us a sequence. Absolute dating gives us the numbers. Together, they are most powerful. And as in this case, for example, radiocarbon dating a seed in a layer helps us anchor the relative sequence in time. Without relative dating, a single date tells us little about what came before or after. So the two things have to be managed and taken into consideration together. Even with modern dating technology, then, relative dating remains fundamental. It is the framework we build everything else upon. Whether we're working on prehistoric settlements or historic buildings, stratigraphy, in particular typology and association, help us reconstruct the past as a continuous story, layer by layer, object by object. In the next lesson, we will look more in detail about we will look more in detail to how we can excavate and record stratigraphy. That is really the fundamental core of archaeological investigation. So thank you for now, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye bye.